I go to school in a big city that is one of the least safest cities in the US. I chose this school for nursing and definitely not the location. I live in a row house. I mean, that's what we call it. Off campus with 4 other girls. Cheaper and nicer than dorms, or so we thought. I guess you get what you pay for. We are all girls and sophomores in college. As you would guess, we like to go out and drink, come back and do things we don't remember. We had just started our rent in August. 3 floors plus a basement, which was padlocked by the owners. Understandable. We would definitely have parties down there to avoid immediate cleanup. The house was great, an amazing location to school and work. I am a CNA who works odd hours, important for later. It was not expensive and good condition. I had never lived with that many people before, just one roommate, so before we definitely knew if one of us had misplaced or changed something. I started to notice my snacks were either half gone or completely gone. I was getting annoyed, but a house of many people, it's too much work to go and figure out who ate it, so I ignored it. Slowly, as girls do, we started making comments about someone eating our food, but passive-aggressively. We all just let it go because who wants a whole house fight? I work until about 11 in the NICU, get home at about 11:30, mostly on weeknights. I started to notice pans left out or snack wrappers around. I thought it was odd because none of my roommates had done that before, but just thought, oh, they probably drank a bottle of wine and then went to bed and forgot about it. Again, my roommate started making comments. This time we started to ask because it was getting annoying, all of our food being gone and things being left. I knew it was one of them, but who wants to admit they ate someone else's snacks in college? Snacks are a high commodity. We chalked it up to the girl who always smokes and eats her weight in food. She swore it wasn't her. This went on for about 2 months. It got more obvious someone was clearly taking everyone's food. Definitely the girl that always smokes. I see her eat the whole snack pantry in a night. I wish it was her. One night at work, I was about to get off, but a situation happened and I didn't end up leaving until 12:30. I took the bus home. I carry pepper spray, a taser, and a pocket knife, don't worry. I got home and I was about to collapse. I wanted to go to bed ASAP. I walked in the front door and the stairs are directly in front of you. You can also see down the side into the kitchen. I walked in and saw someone in the kitchen, but was way too tired to say hi. Thinking it could end in like a 30-minute conversation about nothing, so I went straight upstairs. When I got to the 2nd floor, I noticed all of my roommates' doors were closed, which always means they are all either in their room for the night or asleep. I got a weird feeling, just something that made it click. They were all asleep, right? I texted our house group chat asking if anyone was in the kitchen. I felt stupid for even asking. 2 responded no, and they said the other 2 had been asleep. I knew it wasn't any of my roommates down there at that moment. I dialed 911, but I didn't press call. I crept into my roommate's room across the hall. Thankfully, or maybe not thankfully, she didn't have her door locked. I whispered, telling her I think someone is in the house. She gave me the widest eyes ever and almost looked like she was going to cry. She didn't suspect anything like I had, but for reference, very bad area as in there was a shooting in the house 2 doors down, only weeks earlier by an intruder. She mouthed to me to make the call. The whole time we were dead silent. We didn't hear really anything at all. I was starting to think I was seeing things after such a long day at work, and I was regretting that I dialed 911, thinking I'm going to look like an idiot when they show up, and I was just overtired and dreaming. We explained what's going on, and they said they will send someone as soon as possible, and that actually does mean right away, since it is a big and dangerous city. The police showed up, and I didn't even want to go downstairs, but the operator confirmed it was them, so I did. But the whole time, I could swear the operator could hear my heart beating. The police came in and looked around. I'm thinking, oh god, I look dumb. They ask if there are any other floors, and we tell them technically the basement, but it's padlocked, so really no. They checked the basement anyway, just in case. And well, they were right. A man had been living in the padlocked basement. The lock was pulled off the hinges and just kind of propped against the wall. We never looked at that though. We rarely went out back. The guy had taken a comforter of one of my roommates out of the hall closet, had a mattress from God knows where, and his clothes. Well, he was the one moving and eating all of our stuff. He would come out in the middle of the night and do it. He started getting more comfortable. I don't know if he was drugged out and forgot to clean his tracks or if he just didn't care. Me and my roommates have pretty consistent schedules during the week, probably letting him think that any time after about 12 was good to come out. We never slept with our individual doors locked, and that's what freaks me out the most. He had access to any one of us at any moment, and we had no idea. When he was getting arrested, I was the only one to go down and look. I don't know why I did. I wish I didn't. I took a picture in the process of him being arrested to show my roommates, who were too afraid to go down. This is him. So how my friend group works is we have our little circle of people who we hang around with most often. For big events or bonfires or something similar, we expand and a couple of different friend groups join. Ben is a part of one of these extended friend groups. He is someone who always posts different and interesting things, who always has something to say. I've gotten along really well with Ben at these events and we always end up chatting. I've always found him to be a bit different and a unique individual. Ben started going to my local college this year. He shot me a message on Snapchat basically saying, "Hey, all my friends went away to different schools and the only person I have to talk to from the area is now my ex-girlfriend. I was wondering if you wanted to get a group together and hang out, because I'd like to have some new friends around." It was actually a nice message, because with the course I'm in, I don't get to make many friends. And all of my close friends are spread out now too, so I said yes. The hangout was initially supposed to be one of my friends, him, and one of his friends. It was a day after class and I just got home. He told me he was going to take a quick nap before we all head out. When he wakes up, he tells me it's now too late and he has other plans he forgot about. That was totally fine. I wasn't upset about it. I canceled with my friend too, so I can just sit down and do some homework. He texted me a few hours later. I didn't give him my number, telling me his other plans got canceled and he was now available again and wondering if I still want to do something. I said that my friend was now out of the city and he said he texted his friend but they didn't answer. He decided to pick me up and go for a drive and just chat. Ben gets to my house at around 10. I go and hop into his car and he speeds off. Oddly enough, he's talking with an accent, kind of like Jamaican or something similar. I thought he was just being goofy, so I played along. Sometimes I would answer back in the accent, but then I started to think it was weird that he wasn't talking in his own voice at all. He was driving like a maniac down the street, telling me how he was drinking earlier because he thought he was going to a party. I asked him if he was drinking and driving, and he said no, that he only had a few sips. I know I probably should have gotten out of the car then, but at this point we're flying down the highway and I was scared. He begins to rant about his ex, telling me that there was infidelity and trust issues on his end. He couldn't tell me what they were because he didn't want me to think badly of him. He told me he was still going to marry this girl and have kids together. He ranted about her and got on tangents and started to scream and yell. I started to think maybe he was on some drug or something. We arrive at my college, a half-hour to 45-minute drive away into another city, and he says we should get out of the car. I'm already scared and my phone is dying, so I just listen to what he says. At this point, I'm literally thinking he might kill me. He took me for a walk through the light woods and then started to make sounds like a creature. He would make like dinosaur sounds or sounds like The Grudge. He would also walk like a creature, morphing his body into weird creepy movements. I requested for us to go home because I was literally terrified. We get back into the car and start our drive home. He pulls out a pipe and smokes something. I told him that he shouldn't do that, but he doesn't listen. Now he begins to yell. He starts back on his tangents about life again, and he pulls over the car to get out and do some jumping kicks. Like what? At this point, my phone is dead. He gets back in the car and puts on his favorite song. The song begins slow and then picks up a little later. It's like a 4-minute song. He then begins to scream along to the lyrics and smash the windows and dashboard and wheel with his hands, stomping his feet. I've seen someone passionate about a song before, but not like this. Ben swerves all around the road until we get to my house. He then turns to me and says, without an accent, "I know it's late, but did you want to have sex?" In the most casual tone in the world. I gave a nervous laugh and said, "Actually, I'm good." He turned to the back seat to get something, but I got out of the car and booked it to my house. I locked the door to my house and the bedroom door in my room. It might not sound as terrifying as it was for me in the moment, but at the time I was shaking out of pure fear. I don't know if he was just on some crazy drug or he had a split personality or something, but I've never met a person before who I've looked at and thought to myself, "You're going to kill someone someday." I really hope he doesn't see this because I see him at school frequently. To put this into context, I'm an 18-year-old girl living in New Zealand. I suffer from anxiety and shut down in stressful situations and become rather overwhelmed when I'm not sure how to deal with something. The story happened yesterday while I was waiting at my bus station to catch a bus home. I'd had a long day at work and my legs were in pain, and all I wanted to do was get home and watch some YouTube in bed. It was getting dark and the sun was almost completely down. As I was listening to some music in a rather deserted area of the bus station, a man considerably larger than myself sauntered up and sat down directly next to me on the bench, which I didn't think much of. To put this into perspective, I'm roughly 55 kilograms. He must have been at least 100 and could have easily overpowered me. I noticed out of the corner of my eye that this man was staring at me, and I began to feel a little uncomfortable. But I shrugged it off to him looking at my mask. It's rather nondescript and just blacked. I ignored this and acted busy on my phone to avoid talking. As I said, I had a long day at work. The man began to talk and I pulled out my AirPods to listen to what he was saying to me. The AirPod fell and landed on the ground, to which he picked it up for me, held onto it and stared at it for a few seconds before handing it back to me. I was already getting bad vibes from this man. The conversation went something like this. "Your eyes are beautiful. Did you get them from your mom or dad?" My mom, I guess. I kept my replies short to try to signify I wasn't in the mood for talking, but he continued. "What bus are you catching? Where do you live?" I laughed nervously and told him I didn't feel very comfortable sharing where I lived, but I told him it was further up north. He then said, "Why? It's not like I'm going to hurt you. Isn't it really fancy up there?" This was where I began to feel seriously uncomfortable and began to shake. He asked if I had a boyfriend, to which I said yes, and he proceeded to ask if I planned to marry him, to which I laughed and also said yes. "Oh, it kind of just sounds like you're rooting him. Are you sure you want to marry him?" I was shocked and looked at him before telling him again, "Yes, I do plan to marry my partner." "How old are you?" I don't know what came over me, but I told him I was 21, to try to make it come across as like I was old enough to stand up for myself. "Are you on the pill?" "I'm sorry, I don't feel comfortable sharing that, and I don't see why you need to know." "Oh, so you use condoms instead?" I wanted to walk away, but I was grounded to the bench, and I couldn't move a muscle if I tried. I was uncomfortable and confused as to why he was asking me these questions. "You have someone waiting for you at the bus stop, or are you walking home? How far do you live from the bus stop?" This is the question that made everything click into place, and I realized that this guy had malicious intent. He's not being friendly. This man is going to follow me home and try to assault me or kidnap me. I started to really panic and started desperately looking for onlookers. A young man, possibly my age, walked out of the public bathroom last and had overheard this conversation and was looking at the predator rather skeptically. I knew then I'd at least have someone to help if I just asked for it. By this point, I recalled a video I seen on Reddit about a highly pregnant woman and her daughter being followed to their car in an empty car park in the dark by an older man. This lady was stressfully trying to find her keys in her purse as this man was standing beside her daughters on the opposite side of the car, making small talk with them. He got impatient and had walked away before she found her keys. Someone commented on her submission saying that this was a popular thing, that he was waiting for her to unlock the car so he could get in and control her via threats of her children. It occurred to me that I should skip my bus and catch another one at a later time. I did this exactly. He kept trying to ask where I live, and I continued to refuse telling him where. He also continued to ask how far I lived from the stop and if my partner was waiting for me. I deflected all of his questions, and after 40 minutes, he began to get kind of mad and eventually walked away from the station. He wasn't there to catch a bus at all, but to prey on a young woman at a bus stop. I caught my bus about 10 minutes after he left, and I ran home where I completely broke down and cried in the arms of my partner. This morning, I was so stressed, I contemplated taking the day off of work and staying in bed the rest of the day. I was petrified. I used to work in a strip mall out in a fairly rural area. Most people are recognizable, even if you don't know them personally. People from out of the area frequently stop on their way through other towns. So it's not like they're never out-of-towners, just that they might be easy to spot. Like many places, we have a few homeless folks that hang around the shopping center, and they occasionally ask people for change or food. It can be a nuisance, but the folks that worked at the shops kind of kept an eye on them, to help them out or to keep track of how they are doing. There was this one guy, let's call him Shane, that over the course of years has slowly gotten in worse and worse shape. He would be filthy and was clearly not doing well mentally, and was usually intoxicated. He always had several layers of clothing, and the pants that he wore on the outside of his pants always sagged, making it hard for him to walk. He'd go missing for days and then show up again. We'd wonder what happened to Shane and ask around a bit, and a few days later he'd appear again. He was always so dirty. I always wished there was a way we could get him some help, but I didn't really know what to do. One day, I was out in a major city that is about 80 or so miles away from where I work. I happened to see a very well-dressed, very well-groomed gentleman that looked exactly like Shane. But at that moment, I figured my eyes were deceiving me. This guy has an expensive-looking shoulder bag, a new iPhone, and an Apple Watch. We were both in line at a popular food truck, and it was usually a long wait to order and get your food. Most people just mind their business and scroll on their phones while waiting. This guy, on the other hand, is staring daggers at me. I keep avoiding looking that way, but I keep glancing to see if he's still there. And at the same time, I went to look at him because I was curious about how much he looks like Shane. I glance his way, and I have to stumble back because he's practically right up against me. He has such intense eyes. He sort of whispers to me, but really intensely, and tells me he knows where I'm from and what shop I work at. He gets closer, and I can tell that he smells good, and I could even smell his minty breath. I ask how he knows, and he just smiles. I ask again, and he smiles brighter, exposing a perfectly clean set of teeth, minus one tooth. I'm almost positive Shane is missing that tooth. I edge away, feeling more than a little uncomfortable. His order gets called up, but they say his name is James. The next few days, I don't see Shane anywhere around the shopping center, and I ask around, and no one had seen him for a few days. Someone says they hope he's okay, and another person shrugs and says they wish they could do something to help him. The next day, there he is, filthy as ever, grimy teeth, dirty fingernails, and wearing all of his layers. He sits on the curb outside my shop and asks people for change. I decide to venture out and confront him. I'm 100% sure that it's him, but I don't understand how he could get so filthy and smelly in such a short time. I asked him if he was in the city, and he looks at me through bloodshot eyes and mumbles that he'll kill me if I tell anyone. This takes me aback, and I look at him puzzled. He slurs again, that he will kill me if I tell anyone that he's not actually homeless. He starts to get worked up, and I ended up calling the police because I didn't know at that point what he was capable of. He wandered off, and I haven't seen him since. When I was 10, my parents and I went to visit my grandmother for spring break. My cousin also came to visit, and we decided we wanted to go to the YMCA for the day. My grandma dropped us off and said that she would come pick us up in 4 hours. On that day, the YMCA was empty. There were a couple of adults in the exercise room, but that's it. We went to the basketball court, and after 2 hours of playing tag and shooting baskets, we were bored. I've never been the biggest fan of swimming, but this place had a really cool pool, so we changed into our bathing suits and headed in there. The pool was empty except for the lifeguard. We played a bunch of games and swam laps, but after about an hour, there wasn't much left to do, and there was no one except us to hang out with to keep things interesting. So we decided to play a game of seeing how long we could hold our breath underwater. We stood in the shallow end, near the clock on the wall, so we could time ourselves. Instead of fully submerging, we just stuck our heads face down in the water. We did this a couple of times, and I was winning. On our last round, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I figured it was my cousin giving up and telling me that I won, but instead, it was the lifeguard who told me to knock it off, or she was going to have to ask us to leave the pool. Since we were tired of being in the pool already, we figured we would just get out and get dressed, and go back to the basketball court, until my grandma picked us up. We only had an hour left anyways, and the water was freezing. As we got out, the lifeguard stopped us, and asked if we wanted to go into the sauna to warm up and dry off. The sign said 18 years of older, so, of course, we were super excited that she allowed us to do that. She walked us to the sauna and unlocked the door. The door was glass, and the interior was made entirely out of wood. Inside, above the door, there was a clock, probably to help make sure you were not in there for an unsafe amount of time. The lifeguard stand was adjacent to the sauna, but if you looked out the door, you could clearly see it. She followed us in and went over to the thermometer encased in plastic and unlocked it, so she could crank up the heat. I figured that she must have to turn it on each time, so I didn't think anything of it. Both my cousin and I were very short girls, so we couldn't see the temperature that was on the thermometer knob, but I know she was turning up the heat. Then she left and shut the door behind her. I thought I saw her lock the door too, but I thought to myself, why would she lock the door when we might want to get out? I checked the clock and decided that we should get out in 10 or 15 minutes. It was already plenty warm in the sauna, but now the room was blazing. It felt nice because I was so cold from the pool. After about 15 minutes though, it was starting to get a little bit too hot, and my cousin agreed that we should leave so we can get dressed. I went to turn the knob on the door, but it wasn't budging. Thought maybe it was jammed, so I shook it, but it still wasn't opening, and then I let my cousin try. She couldn't get it open either. We figured the lifeguard would be back in a couple of minutes, so we sat back down and waited. The room was getting hotter now, and I really wanted to leave. I got up and started banging on the door and shaking and twisting the knob, trying to get the lifeguard's attention. My cousin got up and joined me. We started screaming at the top of our lungs for her to let us out, but she just stared straight ahead. I don't think there's any way that she couldn't have noticed or heard two little girls banging and kicking the door and screaming. Now we had been in there for about 25 minutes. It was so hot in the sauna that it hurt to breathe. It felt like my lungs were on fire. My eyes and skin were burning. We sat back down and put our towels over our heads because they were a little damp and it made it easier to breathe. I was so worried about my cousin, as she is a couple years younger than me. I looked at the clock and saw that we had been in there for about 35 minutes. I got up and walked up to the door again and saw the lifeguard still just staring straight ahead. Again, I tried to get her attention by screaming that we needed to get out and banging on the door as hard as I could, but nothing. I was starting to get pretty dizzy, so I went to go sit back down, but the wooden seats of the sauna burned my skin. My towel was completely dry, so I put it underneath me to sit on. My hair was also dry, but I wrapped it across my face to cover my nose, and I squinted my eyes so that they didn't burn as bad, but I could still watch if anyone walked past the door. It helped a little bit. My cousin was laying face down with a towel over her head, not moving or saying anything, so I nudged her to make sure that she was still okay. She was, but I could tell that we really need to get out of there soon, because she seemed a bit disoriented. It had been 45 minutes now, and I was extremely nauseous. There was no way that the lifeguard would forget that we were in there, and I thought she would have to come back soon. But there was this little voice in my head telling me that maybe she purposely locked us in there. Finally, a man walked past the door towards the pool, but for some reason, I just couldn't get up. My whole body was on fire and I felt dizzy. Luckily, this man wasn't going to the pool. He wanted to be let into the sauna and came back with a lifeguard. I saw them walking this way and immediately jumped up to grab my cousin. I knew now for sure that she locked us in there because she pulled out her keys to unlock the door and let the man in. I didn't want to take any chances of us being trapped in there any longer, so as the man was trying to walk in, I was trying to shove our way out. As we were going out, the lifeguard started trying to shut the door and push us back with it. The man was clearly confused about what was going on and said, I think they want out. The lifeguard let out a sigh and opened the door fully, and we ran away as fast as we could into the changing room. We only had about 10 minutes before our grandma was supposed to pick us up. We were both so shaken by what just happened that we didn't say anything to each other as we got dressed or on the car ride home. When we got back to the house, my parents were making us dinner, and I told them the story of what happened. They thought that I must have been exaggerating, and they didn't believe me. I truly think that that woman was going to let us cook alive in there. The only bit of doubt that I have is what would have happened if we actually died. She obviously would have gotten the blame. What was her end game? I'm 21 now, but I still think about this interaction all the time. And when I'm in small spaces, or I get too warm, I still have panic attacks. No one believes this story, and I get it because it's pretty absurd. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to ask for opinions, but do you think this could have been some crazy misunderstanding? Or do you think that she really just left us in there to die, and why?